Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Hello, Michelle. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Sure, of course. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This is going to be great. I'd like to start by asking how you describe yourself and what you do.
Yes. So I describe myself as a message strategist. And I wrote this book called The 3-Word Rebellion, which is my messaging framework for creating a one-of-a-kind message that grows your business into a movement. And it's really that message that allows you to be known for what you do. It allows you to easily come up with names for like your podcast, your offers, all of the things that we struggle with naming when we are in business. But more than that, it allows you to have your audience become the messengers of your message. So I've created this framework that's all based in free writing. It's all about getting your ideas out of your head and onto paper to find that message and a whole suite of messages that are going to serve your business for the next 3 to 5 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I usually will jump into your background, but I want to hold on 1 second before I do that.
Okay.
Because the question that comes to mind is, what if I don't know what my message should be? Like I'm indecisive and I just can't think of anything because I'm trying to create the perfect message and nothing sounds good. What do you say to somebody who is like stuck in that loop? Okay.
Number one, the perfect message is a myth. It doesn't exist. It's like a unicorn. So get that out of your head, and finding the perfect message, that's a way we keep ourselves stuck and we don't put our work out into the world. And I also would say that the process is perfect for a person like that because it is about moving past your own ego and all of the things that get in our way to help you find your message. So it's a messy process, but it's still a process that's designed to help you find that message, because I believe that message already exists. It's already in everything that you've been saying forever at this point in time. And it's just about digging it out and making a commitment to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. So good messy process. That sounds sounds fantastic. So you've also written before this a couple of other books. So
yes.
Let's back up for a second. What made you want to create this business and write books?
Yes. So I realized, I'm an academic and I still identify that way, even though I haven't been in the academy for many, many years at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And when I left the university, I was like, okay, I'm going to go into corporate. And then I found out I'm pretty much psychologically unemployable. I tend to be smarter than my supervisors and the bosses that were over me. I would question everything they would have me do. And I realized that they didn't really appreciate that.
I don't know why not.
I know, having somebody question you at every turn. And for me, it was that realization that I was in market research and I was doing work that I felt didn't really matter. Like it really wasn't making an impact. And I hated that I had to be at my desk between a certain hours every single day, because that made no sense to me and how work actually gets done. And eventually one of my friends said to me, Michelle, you have all of this great knowledge about communication. You need to be sharing that. People need that. He's like, just start a blog, start something so that you're sharing what you have. Mm-hmm. So I started a blog that was terrible because, once again, I'm an academic. But eventually I found my voice, and I think part of me, it's a very natural thing to think, oh, I'm going to write a book. So when I first started the business, I decided to write a book called Speak Up for Your Business, which was all about creating a speech that promotes your business, and in a non like salesy, sleazy kind of way, like none of the high pressured selling from the stage type of thing. Okay. So I wrote that book, and I loved it. Like, I loved the book. Like, it's a good, solid book. I wasn't in love with the book. And so I told my husband, I'm like, I'm never writing another book again. Never, ever, 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 ever. And he's like, okay. And then a couple of years later, I was like, oh, I'm going to put together a small book about the speaking business and how to create a speech that's a product. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm going to write this book. And my husband's like, yep, you're going to write this book. Because I'm like, okay, cool. So I wrote that book, and I liked that book a lot more. And it taught me really how to launch a book. But here's the thing about those two books is that even though I love working with speakers, I will always work with speakers. I myself am a speaker. Mm-hmm. I knew that the work that I was doing could have a bigger impact because I saw my clients use the work we created for their speaking business in every aspect of their business. And I'm like, I'm missing something here, like something really big. And part of it was burnout from talking about speaking and how to get paid to speak and land a speaking gig and write a speech. I felt like I could be replaced by a Google search at any point in time. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. And I wrapped a season of my podcast and was just like, all right, I'm done. Like, I've said all I want to say about speaking, everything. I'm done. And then I'm like, okay, so what's next? And that's when the 3-word rebellion started to emerge, and the idea for the book. And so, of course, I have this idea for the 3-word rebellion, which is based on this pattern I noticed between social movements like Black Lives Matter or Time's Up or Me Too, being able to summarize what they're about and the change they want to create in just a couple of words. Mm-hmm. And my favorite business owners and entrepreneurs being able to do the same thing, like Simon Sinek and Start With Why, Mel Robbins, 5-Second Rule, Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Work Week. They do the exact same thing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I experimented on my clients with their permission and used like writing prompts that come from social movement theory to see if I could help my clients find their message. Mm-hmm. And it worked. And as I started playing with this idea more, I was like, I told my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to write a book about this. And he's like, of course you are. When are you going to call yourself an author? This is what you do. And so that's how the 3 books came about. And now how I'm finally embracing the role of, or the identity of author as well.
Sure. Excellent. Sounds interesting. Well, so I'm curious about this because you mentioned in the beginning that your original blog was bad because you're an academic, and you studied communications like multiple times mm-hmm. and have multiple mm-hmm. degrees. So what is it that you learned about communications in academia that did not translate to the real world, I guess, put it that way? And what did you have to do to get past your academic communications training to communicate better?
Yes. So in academia, especially with writing, you are taught how to communicate in a very scientific, dispassionate way. You cite all of your sources. You know, you talk about the the F value of your ANOVA being significant at a certain P, like it's a very technical type of writing. And open up any academic journal and there will be some great research in it that will put you asleep in 3 seconds because it's so dense and so like structured that it just makes for really boring reading. And I've been in I got my PhD when I was 26, so almost 20 years ago at this point. And when you are trained to write like that, you really have to unlearn it because it's like, oh, I need to cite my sources and oh, I need to like make sure that this is structured properly and I'm using, APA style and all of that. And it took about 6 months before I gave myself permission just to use my normal human voice. And it happened because I went to this event and I saw this speaker, and this speaker was something else. She got up in front of the room and she asked for all of us to stand up. So we're good audience members. We stand up. Yeah. Then she asks us to clap. So we start clapping. Yay. I don't know what we're doing. And then she says, "You have given me a standing ovation and now I must earn it." And I'm like, oh man, that is manipulative.
Oh yeah.
And so during her whole presentation, I outlined this super ranty post called How Not to Be a Motivational Speaker. Like it was ranty, like what you shouldn't be doing, how you shouldn't talk to your audience. And it was all based on the speaker and some of the things and techniques she was doing. And so it was one of those articles I was like, ooh, should I publish this? This isn't very professional. But I was like, nope, putting it online, published it. And a couple of days later, I got this email in my inbox and it was and I was like, because it had the title of the blog post in the subject line. I was like, oh man, I'm so screwed. And this man wrote me and he's like, oh my gosh, I loved this article. He's like, do you take on clients? Because I need a new speaking coach. And I'm like, whoa. Wow, using your own voice really resonates. Having a strong viewpoint really resonates with people. And he became my first client and he was speaking. Oh my gosh, it was wild. He was speaking in front of Barbara Bush's Points of Light Foundation, in front of the former First Lady and all of these celebrities. And that was my first client because I decided to use my real human voice and gave myself permission to just rant and go off and not be afraid to publish it.
Oh, that's great. So it's funny that you mentioned like the give yourself a standing ovation or clap type of thing. I have, so I haven't been in a room where someone has done that in the beginning, but I've been in a room where someone did it at the end and they were like, oh, stand up, everyone take a clap for yourself. And I was like, well, and the speaker didn't say why they were doing this, but they were taking a lot of photographs, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the most brilliant thing I've seen, because we're all clapping for ourselves, and I'm using that in quotes. In photographs, it looks like we are giving the speaker a standing ovation. So they have just like made their photographs absolutely brilliant. And I was like, the next time I'm on stage, I need to remember to do that. And I have not. Remembered to do that, not because I didn't want to do that, but just because I keep forgetting. But yeah, it's funny that someone has done it beforehand. That's really interesting to get someone really psyched into what they're going to say.
I know. And guess what? She never really earned that standing ovation. So I kind of wanted my clapping back.
Oh, she's at the bar too high in the beginning.
I know.
So also with this, you mentioned podcast. What made you want to start a podcast, and what is that focused on?
Yeah, so my podcast is called the Rebel Rising Podcast, and it's really focused on being an emerging thought leader. Like, how do you get your ideas out into the world? How do you make money doing it? How are you a leader? How are you leading your people? How are you leading yourself? So that is the premise of the podcast. And I started it because honestly, I love talking. And when people hear my voice, they tend to resonate. They're like, oh, I love what you're saying. And so it just was such a natural medium for me. Like, for me, it's better. Like, I don't even blog anymore. Like, I just do podcasting and then have the podcast transcribed and clean it up and post it on the website. And for me, it's just this very